In the cup, Goganako. Tear one of my wrists, Aerodactyl. Mixing white with the green. Sworn in the bezel was sworn in them fly switching, torn and pivot. Purple water pecs, Pokia. Hard to find even in West Podia. She was naughtier. The hex pole, Oxo, fuck around, get your nose wiped. Salmon rocket full spikes. I got a Volk with 4 tights. I just tear a go to go on a touch flies a kite. And I got Don Dozo for Bozo. She get shite. Spin on goes tight. Dick terror lies, read your whole life. I'm trying shot, college see Kurt. Afros only concur. Big body fire breather. Let the interior dirt. Officer Jetty want me on curve. Keep it 100, keep my word. Collision course, that's gotta hurt. Digital dash me on a fur. Trojan out the red room, go bird. What's that? This shit just occurred. Mellow the slump is that dirt. Hit him with a terror blast, yet alert. I split a kg a bird. I just did the 1/6 to revert. Chimp out, weave out, glacier on my wrist, but I'm still the coldest captor. In 2013 that summer, they went like Butterfly, Pidgey, Retada. Pokey aiming, but my shooting not gonna. Blunder my dog on the mic, I can't blunder. Huncho, I'm only smoking on the bomber. Pack the rice with like the Richard Piana. Fuck with the Don, you gon' end up Ivana. Keep one in the pocket, can't get calm, mama. It's true, it's true, it's true. Wanna be the very best, I can't be number 2. Thankful for my brothers, make my dreams come true. 100,000 on 100,000, I still choose you. Don't matter if it's 100,000 on 100,000 on 100,000 on 100,000 on 100,000, I still choose you.
Hey, we not my Monty but ready yet. That was just my voice. That's not the thingy fucking up. Though it might be. Who knows? I just gotta change a little thing, you know? We're doing a little PowerPoint tonight, right? I just gotta fix it for a second. Hope that's copyright-free music, buddy. I'm pretty sure it is. Kill yourself, Heath. I upload these VODs to YouTube all the time, so I know what's copyright and what's not copyright. Glad there's a set time and then a music intro to waste battery. Well, we got to see if things are working. We got to get things up. What am I going to tweet beforehand? This is just a ridiculous suggestion. Now, let me turn this fucking brightness down a little bit. Now, Miller is also threatening unsubscription, which would be absolutely terrible if we love the great Cowboy Bebop Netflix adaptation, but we'll get to it in a second. So hold on, I just got to do this thingy, and then I just got to... How about you make this fucking text bigger, you piece of shit? Now you gotta go over here and you gotta fucking press this a bunch of times and then you gotta bold it. How about, does it look good in italics? Nope, that's underlining. Italics. Oh, looks pretty cool, bro. Now let's put in the middle here and let's just fucking... What a terrible PowerPoint, but it's thrown together and it'll have something on screen at the very least. I was gonna put pictures in it, but you know I ran out of time. You know how it goes. Now. Is this stream quieter than usual? It better not be. I don't know how this works. Should I turn the gain up, EliteAri? You think that would sound spectacular? Look at this nonsense over here. This shitty YouTube chat. I have to sign in to fucking chat. How about you kill yourself, YouTube? I hate this fucking website already. We're going back to Twitch. Now, how do I check things? Hey. Let's go. Hey, that's the wrong one. This is the one we have up for the people. Oh my god, we're famous. We had 4 people watching. Or 5 people watching, now we got 4 people. Not even if you think it's okay and give it a 6, I'm unsubbing. Well, I don't give a fuck. Now, anyway. I have a bit about the score at the beginning, too. It's going to be great. I think we're mostly just going to do the Bebop stuff, because we got to talk about it. Then EliteAri is going to hop in, and then we'll see how much. EliteAri did as usual. I don't know if I'm going to have a lot to say about this, sir. Bullshit. So we'll see. But I've got like enough to do, like half an hour, 40 minutes, so we'll see. This wrestling nonsense on my shitty second account that I don't even use to watch stuff is disgusting. Ugh, vomited in my mouth. This is a good start. So I think we'll just get into it. I'm sure there was other things. Oh my god, should we do a little Twitter run real quick? Let's see. Oh, I was owning EliteAri on Twitter. Did you see the rich boy complaining about his computer software? That he somehow spends $1,000 a year on or something? Crazy. Crazy on God. Me announcing the stream. Oh, the Twitter thread. You know, we've been going off with this. We've seen Monsters Inc., which I think we probably had last time we streamed. We streamed relatively recently. I still haven't uploaded that VOD. And then obviously I finished Netflix Cowboy Bebop last night. Can you believe it? There's that EliteAri. That's him owning us. Oh my god, Todar showed up in the Pokemon area. It's the sickest of all time. Me and EliteAri, we fell off. We got like 2 viewers on this Star Wars discussion, but then apparently we got up to like 200 viewers.
Well,
quick.
hello everyone.
How about you shut the fuck up, EliteAri? Now, look, 220, but no comments. It's just me and EliteAri talking to each other, I'm pretty sure. Nope, there's somebody else there. Embarrassing, but not very interesting. But anyway, let's... What was I saying over here? Bebop fans have more reasons to be pissed at this than One Piece fans do. I'll be honest, no. Because people actually like the One Piece stuff and they think it's the real version. So obviously that's much better. But I think we'll just fucking press the thingy and do the thingy. Now, I hope my little thingy in the corner doesn't cover shit up. I'm pretty sure it won't. But we'll see. Oh my god, it's so dark. I didn't think about how dark the computer would be in this moment. Now, can you see the mouse? I think you can. Now, sometimes EliteAri has like a cool pointer. I think if you do that, you have to do it in these or something. But I can't be fucked. Now, we're probably going to do a YouTube intro, even though this will just be in the live tab. But whatever. We can't expect people to actually click on things. That'd be insanity. I feel like there's something else I should have gone over first. Should we, or should we just fucking do it? Should we just fucking do it? Also, if EliteAri wants to get really mad at something, he can just jump into the call preemptively if he wants. You know, there's no rules around here. So let's get right into it, okay? Wait, are we still really quiet? Good old EliteAri says one thing about it, then doesn't follow it up when he should be. Because we do have to fuck with that. That's a big... Hold on, let's go to OBS. I don't know, it looks pretty high up here. Turn your speakers up is what I say to this quietness. I think. I'm giving EliteAri 30 more seconds to respond. I don't know how bad the latency could be. Oh my god, I just saw me click off the full screen mode. So, it's quiet, but it's okay. Why the hell are you like half a decade late? Because I wanted to be. What if I just turn the gain up a little bit? Then it'll surely be fine. What could go wrong? Is gain volume? I don't know. Now... Quiet. What does that even mean? Oh, I tried to double click to make it full screen. Now, wouldn't that be cool? It's about as loud as secondary ENT. This idiot's just making shit up at this point. Embarrassing. Oh, Leary, I booked my flight today. My flights. I'll tell you the time. Oh, no, I already told him, huh? Well, I guess I was telling chat. What a special day it is for everybody here in the viewing audience. Because, as Miller the Killer just pointed out in chat, we might be 4 years late, because I think this came out in 2021. In fact, I know it did. But we're here to finally give our opinions on Netflix's Cowboy Bebop. Can you believe it? Will there be a scorching hot take? Will I hate it like everybody else? Will I be somewhere in the between? And what does that bastard EliteAri think? We'll find out all these things in the great video this evening. Now, I did react. Now, I think these are probably on... Oh, are they on Kyle Entertainment, or are they on secondary ENT? I definitely reacted to the first Cowboy Bebop Netflix trailer. Well, not the little one where they had Iron running and it was like a cast announcement thing. But, the actual first trailer. And I remember saying that it was like, okay. It was like they were trying to be creative, but the characters looked off and the dialogue didn't sound very good. That was a little telling, huh? But then I just ignored it, I think. It came out. I remember Miller telling me a lot about it. I remember forgetting a lot about it. All I remember from Miller complaining about it to me after every episode he watched was that Julia and Vicious were in it a lot more. I feel like that's like the only thing I remember. So going in, I didn't know too much. Now, obviously, there's the funny EliteAri likes the show more than he likes the original show, or he really likes the show or something. We're going to find out later. I didn't want to go back and look up him talking about it to not spoil the great video here today. So, you know, there's some heated debate going on. We'll see what the people like. Oh, I bet chat isn't showing up on screen, huh? This is our first stream on YouTube to the YouTube viewing audience in the future. Chat is definitely not on screen, which means... But there is the live chat replay if you're watching this in a live replay, but if you're watching this as a secondary ENT upload, it's going to be useless, but I'm going to read them out to you, so that'll be great. Jarky Bacon just showed up. Jarky Bacon I checked in with today, only seen one episode of the show, said he thought it was fun, but never continued. Can you believe that? Where is Ari's camera? We hate Ari. We don't want his camera here. Did you choose low latency mode? I think I just did normal latency mode. Where are the Yamiya face emotes? Now this is a big issue. CeeLo Pilder saying the right things. Bacon's laughing. I'm here for this. Can't wait. Bastard Ari. Creedon is saying. Apparently Creedon in chat might hate the shitty Cowboy Bebop live action anyway. No chat on screen. Miller the Killer's calling it out. I didn't even see that. But you know, I don't know how to do that on YouTube. This is crazy. Anyway, now if we were to start this off the way EliteAri would do a digest, we start with the rating first, but I didn't do a little edit thing where it's like a little star and it says something. But if we were to review the Netflix Cowboy Bebop, we would give it a... what would we give it? What a thing. We'd give it a 3 out of 5, I think. Oh my god, I am in the middle, can you believe it? Now, I kind of stooged this off to EliteAri because he didn't want to talk to me if I was just going to be mean the whole time. So I think probably through inferring things, he kind of figured out what I thought. But that's funny anyway. But we'll get into it. I have a bunch of little notes here. When I started writing this like an hour ago, I realized that everything I wrote down was like a negative. So we might come off very negative. I will say, basically, now I think I have this written out here, but we'll do it at the beginning. I watched episode 1, and then I don't think I watched another one for a week because I was like, oh, this is kind of exactly what I thought it was. It's cringy. It doesn't look too good. Everything about the show is different and not in a good way. No, thank you. But I wanted to finish it. And then I got back into it, and I think I watched episode 2 and thought about the same thing. I was like, ugh, who cares? And then, like, partway through episode 3, I was like, I don't know. This is kind of fun. Or something like that, and I was like, this isn't even hard to watch. And then I pretty quickly watched the rest of them. I watched the last 3 episodes yesterday. I will say, around the middle part, I do think the show peaks in terms of its enjoyability. The ending is not so good, I would say. But we'll get into more specifics, specifically, in a second. So those are kind of the overall thoughts. The biggest difference between the anime and the live action. Now, I think these are the things that stick out the most, and we'll discuss whether or not differences matter at all, etc., in this PowerPoint slide, I think. The original Cowboy Bebop is about the vibes, bro. Now, this is something I've been saying a lot recently, that everything that's popular is just about the vibes, bro. And I think it is truly a point that I've kind of been saying forever, and I absolutely do agree, is that the only reason people like things or think things are good are because of the vibes, bro. My first 2 examples of this were The Godfather and Challenges, where I was like, The Godfather is regarded as like the greatest movie of all time because Michael Corleone looks really cool when he's sitting in a chair, and he sounds really cool when he's giving out orders. Even though like the whole point of the movies is that he isn't cool and that he's like bottling it all up, and then he like explodes and hits his wife and shit like that. I'm spoiling the second movie for EliteAri. Can you believe this? Anyway, who cares? It's kind of like Mad Men too. Mad Men's about the vibes of Don Draper sitting in that chair sounding cool as he's talking. Even if the whole show is about how he's kind of a fuck-up. Even the people who sort of intellectually understand the second part still sort of coast off the first part. Especially when it's like cool to say you like something. Even, you can go further with this and say like depth and thematic substance and stuff is also just like a type of vibe, bro, etc., and reduce it all down to style versus substance, and substance is style, and style is substance, etc., but I think Cowboy Bebop is like an exceptional example of it's about the vibes, bro. And those vibes here, as I've described them, are cool, and Netflix Cowboy then I'm going into the differences. Cowboy Bebop is very cool. I think the whole show rests on those laurels. There are characters that are interesting. I think it's a very maturely written show, however you would define that. Like, it feels like the characters sort of have unique adult problems that are very resonant to, like, sadder people rather than being, like, more melodramatic in a sense. And it's very obvious that Cowboy Bebop Netflix is just entirely, completely, and utterly different to that, because the chief defining vibe of Cowboy Bebop Netflix is goofiness, and intentionally so in a lot of ways. Now, it's tempting to sort of write off all the cringiness as just like, oh, goofiness, like, oh, you're too stupid to get the goofiness, bro. But I think they are two different things. I think there is successful goofiness in the show, and there is very unsuccessful cringiness a lot in the show. But I do think the difference is like a tightrope walk of like one what do you call those in angles? Percentages? 1 degree of difference, and you tumble over either side. I think I have it written down somewhere. Oh, yeah, it's here. Where, like, the two famous lines that everybody makes fun of that I did remember when I saw them were the testicles line from the one, I think his name is Santiago, who's, like, one of Vicious's, like, fellow capos or whatever, and they try to do the whole thing later on. And the black males line. The black males line, I think, is, like, just, like, a funny, goofy line. I don't think that one's that bad at all. The testicle ones is a little cringe, but it's not that bad. There are worse things. I think I even go into this here. Now we're talking kind of specifically about dialogue here. But a lot of Faye's, like, uwu quirkiness is, like, kind of the worst of the cringe factor. Another interesting thing, now I'm kind of tangenting on my tangent here. A lot of the show, and I don't know, I'm creating a Netflix zeitgeist kind of thing off the back of like 2 shows. A lot of the uwu quirkiness is very similar to Arcane. Arcane is probably a little better. Like, if you think of the queen of uwu quirky in Arcane, it's definitely Hijinks, and Hijinks is obviously much better than Faye in this. But it is like, it's like the tightrope thing where it's like 2 degrees of difference. And they do all the difference. I think one of the first notes I made on Cowboy Bebop in my thing was like, it's kind of fundamentally bad in the same way that Arcane is, where it's like, you should have like paused for 2 seconds after you said that line before you said the next line, and it just would have been better. The funny thing, the thing that stuck with me from Arcane, and I think this is a season 1 thing, right, is like the epitome of them being like fundamentally like off and like amateurish, is the one scene where Vi hugs Echo. And it's like, if this scene would have been fine if there was like 3 seconds of pause and the line was different after she hugged him. It was like that equivalent of that like bad understanding of sort of conventions that I thought Cowboy Bebop was fucking up a lot, especially at the beginning. Now, I will say, Faye does have moments. The worst thing, Faye'll have a fine line, and then she'll say, like, dick bag at the end. And it'll be like, oh, this is terrible. This is, like, the worst. Like, this is not good for anybody, I don't think. It's got, like, Crap Baskets DBZA vibes, where it's just like, oh, it's horrible and cringe, and I hate it. It's, ugh. But a lot of phase lines like that. A lot of the swearing in this is really bad, too. But I think I get into that in a different part of Changes, because at some points, I think Netflix Cowboy Bebop is trying to be cool, and I think it is trying to be cool with, like, all the edgiest stuff it adds from the original show. Like, Cowboy Bebop is really not that violent. There's not any swearing, I don't think, and there's one shot of Faye and Jet, Julia and Spike in bed, and I think there's also or is it Vicious? There's one of them, and there might be dueling shots. But other than that, there's, like, no sex in Cowboy Bebop, I'm pretty sure. Like, Faye looks sexy a lot of the time. But those are, like, the 3 big changes. But they also do kind of play into the goofiness. It's also, like, very interesting from a conceptual level of, like, were the people that just made it very goofy? Or do they think the original is very goofy? Or did they just decide to change it? And no matter how it comes out, like, I think the show is fine. But it's pretty obvious from, like, a strategy standpoint that that's, like, a terrible idea. Now, it's possible they didn't think they could pull off, like, the cool vibes. So they just said, oh, fuck it, we'll do a vibe shift and hope, like, the characters, who are also, like, fundamentally different in, like, every way, would, like, carry the show. It is a very interesting sort of dichotomy. But anyway, I should probably check up on chat real quick. Next time, EliteAri says. How about we flip EliteAri off? Jockey Bacon says blackmail. Well, Jockey Bacon, let me explain this scene. At one point, Jet Black, our great character, is trying to get information from this cougar old girl who's got, like, information, and she really wants to fuck Jet. And at some point, she's trying to hold them up for more money, and Jet says, "Is this blackmail you're doing? How could you do me like this?" And she, like, says, "You are black and you are male," and then she, like, grabs his butt or something. And this is, like, very cringy to a lot of people. I thought it was fine. I thought it was, like, intentional cringe, but even then, we're talking about the tightrope here, so... Anyway, no image on screen. How are we supposed to know what he's talking about? There is an image on screen. CeeLo pilled. Unsubbed, unable to dislike anything. I dislike plenty of things. Just wait until we get to One Piece. A good chunk of the show is goofy, like when Spike fights the cowboy. That's true, but it's goofy in, like, entirely different ways, where the goofiness, like, because this is kind of the defining aspect. Spike is almost never goofy in the show. Even when he's fighting that cowboy, like, he might make a funny face or go, like, "Gee willikers, what's going on here?" But he's always, like, very serious and kind of pissed off at that cowboy guy. There is goofiness, like, obviously Ed is very goofy, but I don't know if I would describe that as goofy. It is more quirky. Though what's really the difference between those two words? It just, like, the goofiness in Cowboy Bebop is, like, camp, edgy goofy. Whereas the goofiness in the original show is more like slapstick goofy. Or Faye saying funny things. Not Faye, fucking Ed. Me and the character names today, huh? Turn on the cool factor for the anime. The Cowboy Bebop live action had a lot of oh so random. It definitely did. Mr. Ghost Tav, who I don't think I've ever seen in a Twitch stream. Well, oh my god, we're just doing so well here on YouTube. It's definitely true. It does feel oh so random. But again, like, Jinx in Arcane is kind of the quintessential example of, like, even those lines are cringe, but it's about delivery, I guess, in a sense. And they are very good. Like, all those Jinx parts were, like, my favorite part of Arcane. Though even in this, like, I don't think of Faye and go, what a bad character. We'll get to, like, Faye's a part of my favorite part of the show, so we'll see. What value is there in Valve? Oh my god, Half-Life 3, Millie, you excited? What value is there in changing the tone? Like, change the story and the events, sure, because it's a different medium with different runtimes, but how can you... But you can definitely transfer the tone over to live action. I don't know, because I was watching some original scene. Like, I basically went back after it, and I was like, oh, let me just watch all these tremendous Vicious scenes. And, there's just, like, a YouTube video of every scene Vicious is in. It's, like, 11 minutes long. What a refresher. in comparison to this show, where every Vicious scene would probably be 7 hours long. A compilation. The line, like, I feel like only that exact delivery of those lines would cross over. Like, later on when Vicious has the scene where he's killing all the elders, I was waiting for the Tears of Scarlet line, and I was like, could they do it? And I was kind of waiting for it. I wanted to soy out for it. And then they just didn't do it, because it's his fucking dad or whatever. But, like, there's no way. Like, especially those lines. Like, when I think of Cowboy Bebop, I think of the cool vibes, and a big part of the cool vibes is the lines. Jesus Christ. Half of them are my fucking sub-sounds, like a snake cannot eat a dragon, or, they even did alright in the last episode, where Vicious has the monologue, kind of, from episode 5 of the original show. And what's the build-up? Do you have any idea what you look like right now? You look like a ravenous beast or whatever. And even that part was okay. And even Spike's line in the show of, like, oh, I've bled all that blood away, that was okay. But then why are you still alive was terrible. And I was like, oh, they were so close. And why didn't he just yell it? Because especially in episode 5 of the original show, like, that is, like, the one line in, I think, the entire show where Vicious is, like, not cool, calm, and collected. Also, that aspect of Vicious is so interesting, where he's defining... I'm not going to try and, like, dick suck the anime too much, because we love it. And me and Jockey Bacon have been talking about doing it for a re-review thing recently. But Vicious is so cool because he's, like, an enigma, and, like, you don't really know anything about him. But, like, his motivation is like that of like a teenage boy, right? Like Spike and his girlfriend tried to run away and now he like wants to kill everybody and hates life. But his other defining feature is that like he just wants people to be vicious all the time, Lamau. Like he kills Mao in episode 5 at the beginning. Because he makes like a deal with a different syndicate. And he's like, "Oh, you've lost your fangs or whatever. You've got to die." And same with the elders. Like they value tradition more than they value ruthlessness or viciousness. And that's why he's mad at Spike in that one scene where he says, "Then why are you still alive if you're like not a beast anymore?" Like all that's very interesting. I don't even remember what the beginning of that point was. Oh, it's how the like those lines. I don't think you can do those lines in live action and make them good. Like if you even try to recite them to yourself, you're like, then why are you still alive to yourself? It's always going to sound bad. It is significantly difficult. I do agree that like changing well, I don't know, changing the tone could have been good if the show was better. But yeah, it's obviously a very weird decision. What does a bad or even below average piece of media even look like to you, Lamau? Didn't I give something like a 2 recently? I'm trying to remember. I was shitting on something recently. But I can't remember. What do I even think is bad generally? There has to have been things in the past. Even Vinland Saga, when I shit on that for the anime, I still gave it like a 6. I don't know if this is a change thing. I feel like I used to do that a lot with where I'd be like, Rogue One is the worst movie ever or something. I can't even remember what I traditionally hate. But I don't think hating things is very good, so I've just improved so much. Are we streaming on YouTube permanently? Probably not. We'll see. The whole time I was watching the show, I was wishing I was rewatching the original. It definitely gives you the draw of that. I guess I was curious. Curiosity gets you through a lot of things. But whatever. Sure. Where was I up to? I think the parameters, the show... What the fuck? I think this permeates. Oh my god, what a great word. The whole show and all of the character changes. I don't know if I need to go over all the character changes. Like, they're all very different. Faye probably chief. Like, Faye isn't very goofy in the original show. She's like, I would say all the characters are like goofy and not like in the original show. They're all very sad. And like, that's another like defining feature of the vibe, bro. Is like cool, sad vibes. Like, yeah, I hate my life, brother. I want to kill everybody, brother. And I'm going to sip this cool little drink here and smoke a cigarette and look out the window of the Bebop and see my reflection in it. And I'm all sweaty from working out. I'm Spike Spiegel, brother. And, but I just wish I could be with my girlfriend. It's like, oh, it's like relatable. They're like cool and sad like me. Like how I think I am. Because they're like goofy and like then like upset at things. But the things they're upset about are like Jet's whole thing is like, oh, it's like suburban angst. And it's like, well, this isn't as cool. It's okay for what it goes for still. 3 out of 5, etc., etc. I told you my write-up was increasingly negative, and Miller still wants more blood. All the characters are more different and cartoonish. I don't know. I feel like that's the defining difference. Vicious, they tried, and Julia, they tried to flesh out to have them be bigger parts of the show, to probably try and have the show have more of a narrative arc. But does anybody like that stuff? Maybe EliteAri does. Like, the Vicious stuff was hard. Like, he's just like a mean guy, and he's like kind of pathetic in a very overly evident sense that's not too interesting. Julia is like ditzy and not really cool at all. When she's like really cool in the original because she's like very mysterious and stuff. God, the Faye and like everything about those last like 4 episodes are so good. I think it's 3, right? I can't even remember what the 4th to last episode is. Like Faye and Julia just meeting for like the first part of that episode, and Julia like being so cool, but like Faye's line later about how like, oh, she's really not that special, and that's like the point, because all these boys just be hung up on unspecial women, Lamau. But even Faye has the line like, she was the ordinary kind of beautiful that makes them fall in love or something. And it's like, it's kind of contrast Faye being like overly sexualized and like a femme fatale kind of character, but she's like not really cool. It's pretty cool, bro. But anyway, they meet and it's just like weird and stuff. Also, another thing the show does is they like ham-fist all of the characters into all the stories, which again is like fine. It's just like, obviously there's the comparable aspect of like everybody's like problems in the original show. That's kind of another defining feature of the cool but sad thing, is that like all of Faye's problems she doesn't share with anybody. Like even a big example of this is like when they do the Go Me scene, which that was another one where they tried to do it basically one for one, and it's just like kind of cringy because I don't know, anime has this like anti-cringe alias sometimes where it's like, I don't know why it works, but it just works, and it's like the same thing, but the girl is just probably not, her voice is bad, and it's just kind of cringe. Actually, I was kind of into that scene, and then they did the close-up shot of Faye crying, and I was like, oh, this doesn't feel earned at all. This like ruined the scene. I remember that specifically. It was very funny. But in the Go Me scene, like they have the thing, like at the end, what an incredible episode. This is just, my last point here is about how we shouldn't be comparing things, but this is just reminding me of Cowboy Bebop, and I want to bring it up, the original show. There's like the whole episode is like this wacky journey through like a sewer and finding weird otaku dudes that have like old CD players, but when they just have one on the new shit, which is funny. And it's like, oh, it's like this grand adventure to find the player so we could watch Faye's thing. And then like you watch it and it's just like Faye, like everybody's like speechless because they can tell it's like a really sad thing and nobody says anything and Faye's just left there to watch it. And it's like profoundly sad because like these people aren't like really that good friends to each other. Like they don't know what to say in this moment. It's like very sad and alone and isolating for all of them, and there's like the awkwardness of Jet and Spike don't know what to say, and Faye's just like taking it all in and being really sad about it, and it's like, oh, what a great interesting like, oh, I do feel alone even when I'm surrounded by people in real life. This is like descriptively real and all this stuff. Whereas in this it's like, that really sucks, Faye, you know, how's it going, girl? Are you doing all right? And it's like, oh, well, this isn't anywhere near as interesting. This is like people being friendly to each other. I hate this. This is not the vibe at all. Though it is the vibe of the show, but it's just not as cool in comparison, I guess. The dialogue is very different and very quirky, especially Faye and all the famous bad lines. We talked about that already. The action is very goofy and over the top, very violent and sweary too. The action is passable at some times, maybe cool at some, but a lot of the time it's like bad. The shot where Spike is like practicing on his wooden thing just looks so bad. Another thing that looks really bad is Spike in his jacket sometimes. Like it hangs down awkwardly because obviously like the way it looks at the anime is not really how you can make something look in like how it hangs in real life, but they're really trying. But I can just tell like between every take this guy's like tugging on it. He's like, and there's also like a crease that comes down at the bottom. It was like, oh, this is not good at all. But yeah, a lot of the fight scenes were really bad. Like they felt, it's probably just a type of like fight scene where it's sort of like the goofy stilted fighting. Like I know I've seen that in other things. So it's probably just a style thing, but I guess I didn't like it. At the end of it, it does have its own vibe. That, I think, is enjoyable at parts. Should we expect good adaptations? I started to enjoy Bebop Crew's interactions with each other, though the forced family stuff was an eye roller. We kind of already talked about that. There was a point where in episode 3, like, I think this is the one where they're on, like, the planet and they're looking for the doll and they're also going to, like, the sex party thing and the brothels and stuff. And Spike and Jet hanging out there, I was like, oh, I kind of like this. This is all right. I'm, like, interested to see how they react to all this stuff around them and sort of their vibe. And I think that did continue throughout the show in certain parts where it was like, oh, Spike and Jet are, like, when they're not being melodramatic, like, the stuff at the end where, like, Jet turns on him is like, oh, this is, like, really boring and kind of generic. And, like, when they're being funny with each other, it's not too funny. But those in-between moments, like, sometimes the dialogue is bad in between, but I did like their dynamic. And I remember the one episode where it's just Faye and Spike hanging out on the ship trying to figure out which bounty they're going after and never going after any of them. I did, like their dynamic there, too. Like, the dynamics are okay. And, yeah, I do think it has its own vibe at some point that is interesting. But we'll move on to the next one. Other notable differences. The show is not episodic really much at all. I don't know. This is kind of true and kind of not true. Like, there are sort of villain of the week aspects. But obviously all the interconnective scenes are overarching things. This is another thing where I'm, like, interested to see, like, what the first production meeting was about, and whether or not this is, like... Because it sort of is, like, the famous thing, like, a bad YouTube video would say, right? Where it's like, they don't understand the original, and that's why the new one sucks. Obviously, Julia and Vicious were cool because we never saw them, and we only saw them sometimes, and they were mysterious. So if you have them in every episode, that's gonna ruin everything. But I can also equally see, like, the fleshing, like... It's kind of the anti-Star Wars thing that me and EliteAri talked about recently, where it's like, every aspect of this original trilogy is fleshed out to, like, no end in a bunch of other media. When a lot of the time in the original, it's just like an implication, or it's just like one thing for a second, like Boba Fett or whatever the fuck. It is undeniable that there is some sort of inherent interest from an audience, especially an eager audience, in fleshing out all those little details. As much as there's like red letter media memes that are like, actually that sucks and is bad, I feel like there is a much bigger, larger, like, oh, I am curious about that sort of mindset. So I guess I could see you talking into having them be reoccurring characters. I feel like it would have been better if it was just constricted to, like, if you just did, like, episode 1, 5, and 10, and just had a lot of that be the fleshing out. I don't know. I guess the bigger problem is just that Julia and Vicious aren't very good. I remember thinking Julia was good at parts. Not as Julia, but just as a character. But then the ending is real bad, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And it kind of ruins everything in retrospect. Like, Anna and Grin, or is it... It is Grin, right? I can't even remember. They're pretty good. And some of the club stuff, like, again, the club sort of vibe where it's like a seedy club and we're all doing meetings here, like it's Boardwalk Empire or something. Like, that is a cool vibe, obviously. But it's just like, why? Now, the Jet ex-wife, daughter, and new husband thing, and it being an old cop buddy of his, like, I was kind of waiting, and I wonder if they would have eventually done this in season 2, where they spring the husband is, like, awful, and they get to do the one Jet episode, the Elm episode, where his, like, girlfriend... Because that is such... Again, I don't want to do this. I didn't want to. We didn't really talk about the adaptation thing. Remind me to talk about that after I glazed the original show a little bit more. Like, that episode is so cool, because it's, like... Jet's like, oh, why did you break up with me? And, like, I'm, like, the perfect partner, aren't I? And the show's like, yeah, he kind of is, but that's why she was, like, annoyed and bored with him, because he did everything for her, and she couldn't grow and make, like, her own mistakes, and, like, there was clearly, like, an age difference and stuff, and it's like, that didn't work out. And Jet's girlfriend goes and marries, like, or goes and gets with, like, a complete, like, bum dude who's, like, useless and, like, dweeby and, like, kind of violent and not really cool. And it's like, oh, like, she would rather be with this guy and make her own mistakes and, like, try and be the one that is, like, looking after than be with Jet. And it's, like, sad and, like, oh, it's just sort of like, when you're in a relationship, you just slowly annoy each other until the annoyances become too much, and you're like, you never actually communicate any of it. It's like, oh, this is, like, a great, like, this is how relationships are. This is, like, oh, this is cool. This is, like, nuanced and not really what you would usually see, etc., etc. And she doesn't get back with him in the end or show any real interest in him in the end, and he sort of just gets over it and tosses the thing in the water or whatever. It's like, oh, what a great little episode. But here it's just like, oh, like, Jet was unfairly fucked over, and that's why he lost his wife, and the new husband's, like, okay, and the daughter kind of, he doesn't see her, and she even calls him daddy at the end of episode 10, and can you believe that? And it's like, it is very, like, I don't know, suburban, like, he's a single dad trying to do it, you know? Whatever. It's like, whatever. But this is, like, another thing. We see the daughter, we see stuff about that. And I don't know, when it was just a background element, it was kind of, like, cool, where it was just like, oh, like, there's that one set piece where Jet is, like, beamed into her recital or whatever while Spike's beating up, like, the whole army outside. And, like, oh, that's a cool scene. And it's like, oh, when it's just, like, a background thing that he mentions every once in a while, that's, like, okay. When it's, like, in the forefront, it does kind of reveal its, like, boringness, I guess. There's even hints of Ed throughout, where Ed's sending them, like, bounties and stuff, which is obviously a change, but whatever. Faye searching for a past is also one, though they really don't do too much with it. She just, like, meets that guy in the beginning, he gets turned into a tree, then the mother figure comes back. Now, I guess I should talk about the adaptation thing. Good adaptations. The obvious opinion that I do agree with, that is sort of like the counter jerkwave opinion, is that Well, obviously changes from the original show shouldn't matter. You should just judge the show on its own merits. Now, there are counter-arguments that are, like, interesting, like, well, why would you use the IP if you don't want us to come with expectations? That is probably a poor strategy thing. I don't think that really has any indication of whether or not you should like the show. It does, of course, bring up comparisons automatically sort of in your brain a lot. But also, like, I'm in the upper percentile of, I think I've seen the original show, like, twice, fully. And I've seen particular episodes way more times than that. And it's quite possible, like, when you look up Cowboy Bebop on Google, like, the first thing that comes up on Netflix Cowboy Bebop is Season 2. And I think on EliteAri's favorite website, IMDb, it has, like, a 6.7 out of 10 or something. I could easily see, like normal people just sort of, like, watching the show and thinking it's, like, cool. And being like, oh, that was pretty good. And moving on or whatever. Obviously, it's very hated in internet, like, review spaces. But so are all those, like, Disney live-action things. And people love those. Because live-action is real and anime is fake and lame. So I still do think, even though I'm, like, contradicting this, I still do think I fundamentally agree with the adaptation shouldn't matter. And there are, like, adaptations that everybody hates that I kind of like. Like, I do like that Netflix Death Note movie. And I remember my, like, frustration was, like, everybody was like, well, L shouldn't be a black guy, and he shouldn't, like, run after Kira. Isn't that ridiculous? And I was like, that doesn't matter at all. Kill yourself. And I could easily see EliteAri, if he really does like the show, being like, well, none of this matters. Kill yourself, loser. And I probably would agree with that. And I think it is a weakness, but I think it's a weakness that we all fall for a little bit, you know. It's going to be a little frustrating at points. But anyway, that's sort of the adaptation nonsense. I've talked about that a million times before. The wokeification. They did indeed woke it up, and it was very interesting in a bunch of regards. Faye is gay. Gren is non-binary more than just being a guy that got experimented on. Though Gren in the original show does wear dresses by choice sometimes. So that's kind of interesting. So maybe they didn't change Gren that much. Anna is a black business owner. Julia is both more of a girl boss by the end and also severely less cool and like Damsley, which was interesting. Also, Anna is changed to be a woman instead of a... Not Anna. Mao is changed to be a woman instead of a dude. I'm sure there's other things. Lots of different shapes and body types, sexy gilf betrayals, etc. There's that black and male girl who's clearly supposed to be like a cougar sexy girl. And there's also like Faye's mum, who was a lot older than like a general MILF in a show would be. I thought those were kind of cool. Everything's much more sexualized too. Naked people, Julia and Spike sex scenes, etc. I think they make it all fit very well, especially in the more gritty, seedy vibe they had going on. So basically, I think all the woke stuff is pretty good. There is that, I think it's episode 3 again, where they go into like those sex clubs, and I'm like, oh, this does fit, I feel like, in the world they've created here. So I think all these things fit in. Those are just, I don't know if I really had much to say about that. It's just kind of funny that they did all those things. I can see a lot of people being very mad at the show for this. Though I honestly don't remember the wokeification of this show being like too big of a reason why people hated it. It's probably just the wacky dialogue. I will say on the earlier point about the goofy dialogue and stuff like that, it obviously lends itself very easily to being made fun of in YouTube videos where, like, they're going to say the joke, they're going to have, like, a reverb on the last word, and they're going to zoom in on the face, like that cosmonaut guy does in his video sometimes when he wants to stress and make you think that a line is bad or whatever. You're, like, setting yourself up for that. I don't know. I feel like the strategy from a, like, standpoint of we want the show to succeed by the showrunners was probably really bad, even if I think the show they made was kind of alright. Because you have to know all these things. You have to know that everybody's going to, like, inherently hate this from the get-go. It is so funny that, like, the One Piece... Because this is kind of the defining talking point EliteAri always has, about how he's like, oh, the One Piece show is, like, exactly like this, but everybody likes the One Piece one. And it's to the point where I think we've all convinced ourselves that it's, like, the audience was just told to like it by Oda, so they like it. Or maybe they just would have liked this if, like... I don't know. The One Piece show probably isn't going to have all this, like, sex and wokeness stuff, which probably does, like, make people uncomfortable in certain senses. I don't know. That'll be very interesting. Obviously, I'm going to watch the One Piece show soon, so we'll see if, or maybe EliteAri will pop in at the end and it'll flesh that thought out more. I kind of forgot where I was going halfway through. Things I vaguely liked. Oh my god, EliteAri, we're time for the positives. Let me see. Let me read up on chat too. My goodness, we're chatting. Where's Mr. R to complain? Just watch 80 OVAs and you'll genuinely dislike stuff. I do. Heath is going through his 80s OVA space, and I keep checking, like every day I'll check his mal and his Twitter consumption thread and see what he's been watching and what he's been giving him. The poor Heath is going through the trenches out here. He hates all these things. The other thing that's interesting about Heath's little journey here, tangent, is that he's watching a lot. Like, I'm only watching these OVAs if they have like Blu-ray releases and they're at least in 1080p, right? I'm not watching any of these like 220p fucking OVAs. You're crazy for that. But anyway, that is very funny. He do be hating on him. It's so insane that the people behind this thought the series would be better if they were more serialized and cut away the main plot every episode. Do they even like the original? I think I kind of said all that right, you know. It's, hold on, better if there was more serialized and cut away at the main plot. Okay, yes. I figured it out. You do realize a 6 out of 10 means there's more good than bad, that it succeeds as an adaptation? No, I don't think anything about that last part, but I do think it means that it's more good than bad, but we'll get to that on this very slide. Anime handled the blues better as the live action was more cringy on the execution. Miller, what do you think? What do you give the One Piece live action 1 out of 10? Lee, Jock Bacon says. But I can't wait to agree with the great Miller the Killer on this shitty One Piece live action. It is a big thing. I am very, like, if everybody loved this show and was like, oh my god, Cowboy Bebop is so great, did you see that Netflix show? I feel like I would. I'd probably still give it like a 3 out of 10, and a 3 out of 10 is probably what the One Piece show is going to get. But I will be very much more mad at the One Piece thing for anybody, like, that has seen it without watching, like, or reading the manga. Like, that will piss me off, so. Why did they even put Garp in? Make him a different character? Worst piece of media I've ever seen. Rise of Skywalker is better. Oh, why did this show open with a guy complaining about corporations or something? Oh my god, when we started with that, I was like, oh no, this isn't going to be good. But it's true, that just doesn't really go anywhere, I don't think. Maybe they would have come back to that in the second season, that they were very heavily thinking they were going to get. But yeah, that kind of just goes nowhere. What does that have to do with the rest of the show? Did they agree with that guy? I have no idea. Maybe it was just vague platitudes to sort of like edgier socialist stuff. That does like fit in with like the vibe of the show, right? The like very sex positive, body positive, sort of more woke stuff. Those people are obviously gonna be more like anti-corporation and shit like that. Something, the rest of the show. Oh, that brought up another point, but I've forgotten it. I had it in my head. It was so good. Let's read it again. Why did the show open on corporations or something like that? What does that have to do with the rest of the show? I've forgotten. Oh my god, it was a great point. I was so excited to bring it up too. Anime has more room, imagination versus live action is more of a matter of fact. It's like, it's more comparable to real life situations. That's probably true. The finale was so bad. Who thinks Bebop would benefit from the crew splitting up partway through only to inevitably come back together? Oh, you can just see exactly how episode 1 would go too. It was so funny. I think I'll talk about this more later, but it's like, oh fuck it, we'll talk about it now. Like, Jed is really down and sad, and he's gonna go and try and get a bounty in episode 1, but like the bounty's gonna beat him up because his leg's still a little sore, and he's gonna be like, man, I wish I had my boy Spike, and Spike is gonna, he passed out, and he's gonna be going around with Ed, and he's actually gonna get a bounty, and he's gonna befriend Ed, and Faye's gonna be off, and she's gonna get a call me scene before she returns, and they're all gonna come together in episode 2 or something, and they'll never be back together, and then in episode 3, Vicious is somehow gonna be let out by a side character we've forgotten about, but he's gonna be like different, and he's gonna go through this thing, and Julia's going to be hunting him this time, and Julia's going to do some morally reprehensible thing, and she's going to have to shoot somebody or something, and she's going to have some moral dilemma, but she's going to go with it because she's a girl boss, and then we're going to go through in this. It's just like, oh, you can see exactly what like the first 3 episodes of the next season is going to be because of how they set it up at the end. It was a very obvious, like, oh, this is the end of season 1 thing. Like, we're splitting up, but we have the obvious comeback, and we're all and they're all down in the dumps at the end, and it's very funny. Also, in retrospect, now that it's the only season, very like sad way to end the show. Anyway, also the second to last episode flashback episode, so formulaic. That's fine. Oh my god, remember when Boardwalk Empire did that at the end of season 2 and it's like the greatest episode of television ever? Oh my god. The incest, crazy. Why do you waste time watching this instead of the Bebop movie? Well, me and Bacon will get to that later, I think. So anyway, things I vaguely liked. I'd say for the first 2 episodes, I thought the show was pretty bad. Faye was not good. The dialogue was very cringy. But then, like, halfway through episode 3, I realized I was having a good time. This is also around the same time I realized they shot the series in New Zealand, Lamau. There were some cool sets, I thought, and environmental locations. So I kind of went over that first part. I'm watching episode 3, and they're fighting on a rooftop. And I look in the background, and I'm like, is that the fucking Sky Tower? I was at the top of that thing. Because I lived in Auckland for like 4 or 5 months. I was like, holy shit, it's Auckland. And I started recognizing other buildings, and I'm like, did they get rid of the ANZ logo on the top of that building? I think they did. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. Because I assume in like American shows, and especially, I think about this all the time with like American video games, where it's like, if you're from Seattle, is like The Last of Us Part 2 even better? If you're from New York, are you like sick of your city like identically being in every Spider-Man game or something like that? That like blows my mind. Like if a fucking video game was set in like Brisbane City or something, I'd be like, I know that place. This is fucking crazy. Like I think in the video game Donkey video, right? He goes through and he's like, oh, and this is where the thingy would be if this was like, or whatever. And I'm like, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. And like, I don't think I've ever seen a show or anything shot anywhere near where I live or anything like that. And so for it to be in New Zealand, and like every background shot, I was like looking around. I'm like, oh, I know. Like there was the one shot where they had like, it was like the edge of like a bridge thing, and I was like, oh, that's the fucking the bridge in Auckland. I was like, oh my god, I've sat there before. So that was a very interesting first time ever experience for me. I thought that was very funny. And then I did look it up, and yes, the whole series was shot in New Zealand for some reason. I think that comes down to a lot of the environmental locations looking kind of cool. Like when they're versing the eco-terrorists, and it's like that one, like a really blue planet. I thought that was cool. I do think a lot of the environmental locations and just like the city stuff. There is one part where Spike is just like fishing, and it just looks like rundown, boring, like suburbial New Zealand or Auckland, and it did take me out for a second. So I wonder if there's more of that when you've like know the location, or it's just in the background and it's clearly like just like houses, and it's like this doesn't feel very Cowboy Bebop. That was just really interesting to me, and other times like it would look good. There is obviously a thing where the show looks cheap in some places, which I know is a thing. Because I read a few reviews, I watched a Critical Drinker video, and I watched a part of a Cosmonaut Variety video on this just before we started, just to see like what the general criticisms are. And they're all about what you expect. I saw like the first 30 seconds of the Mother's Basement video, everybody. Very cool. I think there is a Trixie video about it too that I'll watch at some point. Maybe on our next stream. Cheap plug. But yeah, so that was... At some point, I just started liking watching the show, which is a very big thing, because usually even stuff that I really like, I don't like the actual experience of watching it. But I also had that with you a lot, so I don't know if it's like these Netflix pulpy, like, shows that I'm just curious about, that lend to good experiences watching, I guess. Also, the episodes are relatively short, so it's okay. I thought episode 6 was unironically great. The Faye love story with the mechanic girl was sweet, and the fact that they let it end nicely was very surprising to me. Seeing Spike and Julia on screen together for the first time was interesting too, even if that wasn't paid off the best later. Oh my god, this Faye and like mechanic girl thing was like unironically a 5 out of 5 storyline. I was like, this is great. Like this mechanic girl shows up and she's all sweaty. I'm like, oh, she's kind of hot, bro. What's going on here? And then she's talking to Jet, and I'm like, is Jet gonna kiss this girl? And I'm like, I don't know, kind of a lesbo cut here. And then I realized what they were doing with Faye when she immediately starts flirting with her, and Faye's kind of got no idea. The Faye character in that scene is like, actually, it's like, oh, this is actually interesting. Like she is really awkward, and this is a big thing about Faye in the original show is like, she is like a femme fatale, but she is like completely romantically like immature in a sense. Like there's also kind of the like with the Jet thing about Jet's girlfriend like liking some bum. Like Faye did have like a lover when she first woke up, but it was a guy that was like manipulating her to try and get her money. And then he like became a fat guy, and she was like clearly still like in love with him, even though he had like scammed her and gotten fat and looked like shit and stuff like that. And that was like a neat like, oh, Faye's just like she's just like you and me. She's just a lover girl, you know. But in the show, sort of adapting that as her being just sort of like unaware and sort of her arrogance melting away and all that stuff, I thought was very interesting. And like how she initially reacts to the flirting is like interesting. That we do cut to like them just post coitus. And it probably would have been interesting to see that a little bit further before that. But it was very sweet. And the whole episode, it's about like this gun she has and how it's a scam. And I'm like, oh no, it's going to be like the show. And this girl's like clearly just fucking with her. And like, it's going to be a reveal that she's like the scam in the end. And she was just like, you're a nice piece of ass, toots, but I'm on my way. But actually, they just like leave. And like, they're like nice. And obviously, she would probably come back in like season 2 or something. So I was like, oh, this is actually like just a nice, sweet little storyline. I was like, this is great. And obviously, it's a love story. So I loved it. And I thought it was great. And I don't know, it just sort of fit that Faye was gay. You know, she was a little weird the whole time. And this is the episode after her and Spike are just hanging out on the ship. And I was curious if they were going to hint at any Spike Faye stuff, which the show kind of very lightly does at times. But very importantly, never actually leans into it all. And it is always like a very interesting thing, especially Faye's like plea to him at the end, whether or not that's platonic or whatever. And whether or not she's kind of like, oh, just love me, even though Julie is dead and we can like keep doing this or whatever. And also they're just like the lead boy and girl. So you're like hunting and sniffing inherently for any hint of them being together or anything like that. I really got to start speeding this up, huh? If we want to talk to EliteAri at the end, because I don't know how much battery we're going to have left. Anyway, yes, so that was all good. I did kind of like the Spike repeating thing. Obviously, it's been done in a bunch of things way better. But yes, Spike and Julie, like I expected Spike to not like meet up with Vicious until the end or something, especially at the beginning. But then they have that like confrontation at the end of episode 3, I think, where he shoots at him, which I thought was actually pretty cool. And then I was like, oh, so are we going to do the Julia thing? And obviously here it's interesting. And then, but later on it's kind of just disappointing. She's just like mad at him. It's like stupid. But it's also interesting that they kind of saved that for the flashback thing. But even in the flashback thing, I don't know, that could have been handled better. The flashback episode was like interesting. I don't know if it was the best execution though. I feel like this write-up comes off a lot more negative than I actually feel. The viewing experience is mostly enjoyable, I think, and that's kind of the most important thing. So that's what we talked about. All right, let me speed through these last 2 thingies. The Julia twist is really bad, Lamau. It is maybe the worst thing in the show. I don't buy it at all. She's rocketed back and forth as a character. It's never really fleshed out why she would ever have liked Vicious in the first place or why she'd be mad at Spike later. Everything relating to Vicious is kind of awful and generic, and it's probably the worst change overall. There's one scene with Vicious where it's almost interesting, where he's talking about how he watched his mother kill herself, and it was like, oh, and it's like, oh, he's just a victim of a abusive father. But then, and then even how he had internalized it, where I was like, I was weak back then. I don't know, him sort of vulnerable in the like, obviously it's like Vicious is supposed to be like the cool guy, so to make him pathetic is like supposed to be like inherently interesting at the beginning, like when they try to make him kill Julia, but then that's sort of like a recontextualized into being the father-son thing. But then even in the flashback, he's just like kind of this annoying, like idiot violent guy, and it's like, I don't know, it would have been cooler. Like, I feel like the only shot you ever get of Spike and Vicious together is like, in the show, is like they go back to back while they're firing and they're like smiling, like they're cute little friends. It's like, oh, you don't really know what the mechanics of their fallout were, besides it's probably Julia. Like, that works so well just through implication, but here Vicious is just, like, it would have been cool if there was a change or whatever, or if he was like a sympathetic guy and like they actually cheated on him, but he was just like terrible the whole time, so it's just like, oh, whatever. Fearless seems like a pointless addition, and it ruins some lines they clearly wanted to include later, or in some cases, Vicious would just say Spike when he should be saying Fearless. This is very interesting. They gave Spike a name like Vicious, I guess. I don't know if it's revealed in the original show, and I just forgot that, like, Spike is a... But it can't be, because when Mal dies, he says, if Spike were here, and it's, like, the coolest thing ever. And Vicious calls him Spike all the time. And there's a line when he walks into the church, where the line in the show is, like, it's something Spike, or whatever. And he just doesn't say a name at the end, because obviously, in the show, Vicious should say Fearless and never say Spike. And it's just like... Well, you just kind of ruined that line you were clearly trying to recreate, but you just went around it for fearless. I don't know. I don't know what the point is. Also, it's a much, like, I don't know. Vicious is kind of a stupid name too, but I'm accustomed to it. Fearless is just like, this is like a terrible name. Like, what are we doing here? Accusations of looking cheap. Spike's main outfit looks kind of bad. It's weird that they changed so much, but we're so married to the bad anime costuming. True. Other than that, I don't really agree. Ed seemed really bad. Yeah, Ed's one appearance at the end was very cringe and bad. But I don't think the show looks cheap that much. I know that's like a big criticism of the show, but I don't really agree. Is our last one before EliteAri jumps in. Get ready, EliteAri. Put your finger on the trigger. It's shocking. It's shocking how little they use the direct music a lot. The OP is obviously similar, though they change up. Though the change ups sometimes were appreciated, and the ED changed all the time. Sometimes I think for like 2 episodes they use Real Folk Blues. The intro would be somewhat different. I did like the transitions into the intro being different sometimes. I appreciated that. Other times it would just be other songs. But a lot of their music they used was remixed. And very sort of hard to identify. Whereas I feel like they just shouldn't have done it. Just like, if you're going to do it, just do the soy thing and have them. And I was waiting to see which Rain they would use and thought it was sick. Obviously, instead of the Yoko Kanno version of Rain, they used the Steve Conti version of Rain when Spike's walking into this church. It is like the biggest thing whenever you go back and watch episode 5. You're like, man, I wish this was a Steve Conti version. It's so much better. And they got to do it in the show. And I was thinking, like, before I got up to the scene at some point, I was thinking, like, if I made this show, I would have the Steve Conti version and I'd have it be like a big moment as a statement of how it's the better one. And then they kind of did that. But it also just wasn't as cool as like the way like they could have done that scene cooler. They do use Greenbird at the end, but I think, but that was kind of weird. I didn't like the scene of him falling out. Obviously, Julia like pushed him out, and he's like looking back, and the framing of him falling looked really bad. If anything looked cheap, it was kind of that. I know EliteAri does like that part because when I mentioned Greenbird when I was doing all my OST lists, he like recognized that song and was like, oh my god, that was we used at that great moment at the end of Cowboy Bebop live action, so he can defend that later. But I think a version of Elm was used lightly at one point. I only vaguely remember this. I can't place it, but I feel like I heard like 3 hums of the first bit of Elm. Or it was before the humming part at one point. But Jesus Christ, just use fucking Elm. What are we doing here? Memory was used lightly at one point when we're trying to recreate the Spike dropping the rose thing, which didn't look very good in live action either. But it was remixed a little bit, and I don't remember any Waltz of ZZ, which is like crazy because that's like probably the best song from the original soundtrack. I don't know, how did I rank them? No, I definitely put Call Me above it, and I might have put Rain above it. And I wanted to say it was like the most iconic song from it, but Memory probably is. But Waltz for ZZ, that's like the Mount Kilimanjaro speech is like the greatest part of that whole show, and it's like, oh, Waltz for ZZ's playing there. It's the greatest thing of all time. It's so sad. Now, maybe I just missed it on this music point. I don't know. I thought maybe they were going to do the forced Call Me in the last episode with Faye True. There was like 8 minutes left and Faye was leaving and it didn't seem like we had much else to do. So I was like, oh my god, is she going to find her house and we're going to get Call Me in this episode too? That would be funny. That's also another thing where Call Me is the goofiest song of all time. But man, does it hit hard. It's just like, man, the original show pulled it off because it was so cool. The tone and the underlining tragedy of it all would have been a very interesting aspect going into a second and potentially final season. The arrogance to sequel bait so hard is a little crazy. There's no ending. Like, they just were like sure they were going to get a season 2. It's entirely possible they were promised a season 2 and they just got a lot of blowback. And Critical Drinker in his video said like, oh, like by the second episode, 40% of the viewership had dropped off. That sounds bad, but that's entirely possibly like the average for a Netflix show where like episode 1 gets a bunch of views, and like I know that's the case for wrestling a lot of the times. Like the big premiere episode will get a lot of views and then you'll drop down like 30% or something. So again, that's just like a statistic out of nowhere that means nothing. But maybe that's why it got cancelled. Maybe all the blowback was why it got cancelled. It did review very poorly, even with like mainstream outlets, not just YouTube pricks. But yeah, it's so interesting because the tone of the show is so goofy, and like the whole time goofy things, like sad things are happening, there's just sort of like an automatic because of the tone, like, oh, it'll all work out in the end, and it usually does, except for the last episode where it sort of works out in the end. But then you remember this is Cowboy Bebop, and like the episode, the ending is very sad, and Spike is just gonna die. It's like, oh, It would have been very interesting to see how they would have handled that. I am very sad that there isn't a second season. Just out of curiosity, I would have loved to have seen what they would have done, etc., etc. So I'm sad in that aspect. So EliteAri can join at any moment. Let's see. We are running out of battery. EliteAri, get in here! And I'll re-chat. Now, I'm probably not going to hear him come in, so he's just going to start speaking at some point. And that'll let me know that he's here. Where are we up to? Did they film in NZ because of COVID? Maybe. That's possible. Are you going to talk about how stretching single anime episodes out to an hour is the worst thing they could have done, loses all the fun and pacing? Not really. I don't, like, they barely did any of the plots, like, actually. They were all, like, completely different. So I didn't think, like, stretching them out, because they really didn't do the plots. It was just kind of, like, the characters and the vague ideas. So I don't think that was a problem at all. It's also very cheap to film in New Zealand because they decreased wages in the film industry or something to ensure the Hobbit films were made there. Well, that's truly epic. We hate workers here. Oh, well, Larry, I see on my stream you're here. What a loser.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Oh my god, he doesn't sound
listening
very
to
happy.
Miller's anti-Cowboy Bebop talking
he's mad at Miller, not me.
Even in the meta of the creation. Yeah, you know.
Don't worry,
they even paid the workers low. That's crazy.
Got 2 chats here, Leader. 2 chats. Don't worry, New Zealand was the filming location in 2019. I did read that they had to pause because of COVID or something. I'd love to see them finish the show on their terms and have Spike live. Oh, that would have been funny. But EliteAri, you're here, the great defender of the great Cowboy Bebop live action. You love this show. First of all, I'm very curious, like, which aspects you like and which aspects you didn't like. Because I have heard you say that you thought, like, episode 1 was, like, the worst part at some point. But outside of that, I haven't heard you say much. So, just tell us all.
Okay, I mean, firstly,
I don't remember it. It was a long time ago.
This was before I had a YouTube channel, I'm pretty sure, I think. So I didn't write any notes, didn't really critically think of anything at all. So that's my first thing here. Secondly, yeah, I agree. I think I remember watching the first episode. Firstly, I remember being excited for it, and I was like, "Oh, this trailer looked kind of cool." And they have
you have seen the original,
kind of like
right?
the real opening or whatever. Yeah, I've seen the original. Okay. It was like maybe the second or third anime I ever watched.
Oh, I should know that from
your
video.
I remember thinking it was like, yeah, it was like okay. I was like, oh yeah, I like enjoyed this. It was pretty good.
You like the
so I'm not like
the
a big Cowboy
Netflix show
Bebop
much
fan
better.
or anything.
Yes.
I think generally probably, or I enjoyed watching it more. But the what was I saying? Oh yeah, I watched the first episode after being excited. I was like, that was like pretty bad. Like, why would I watch this? Like, what is the point? Like, I remember thinking it was like really similar to the show, but like worse in like basically every way. And I was like, oh, I don't get what the point of watching the show will be. And then I watched like the rest of it, and it kept diverging basically, and they kept adding like all these storylines that at least I didn't remember, like some new kind of stuff with like Vicious and I don't even know what else. Like even Faye, I think had some new stuff. And I was like, this is actually kind of cool, and I really liked it. I think I had a similar thing to you, which is that it's like, it feels to me like they probably made the worst possible choice in like how to adapt something, but I think the end result is like something enjoyable that I liked watching. Yeah, I don't have any. I remember, I don't know what I would think this compared to like stuff I've seen these days, for instance, with more recent stuff. Even compared to like the One Piece thing, I have no idea. I'd want to rewatch this to judge it, but it was good. Yeah, like when I think back, I have like a few things that I do remember liking a lot, just like random scenes that came to mind. The one that I remember the most, and maybe you can tell me if this, I think it's like, I don't know, episode 2 or 3 or something, but it's when Faye is like, she's like, I want to live or something like that, and she's like crying and stuff, and she's in a ship or something. Do you remember that?
No.
Okay, she's like, it's the one with the eco-terrorists, I think, and they're like turning people into trees
yeah,
or
I
whatever.
think that's episode 4, and she does turn back to like save him in her ship, I think.
Oh, is that what it was? Okay, yeah, I remember almost crying when I was watching that. I was like, I'm so invested. This is so good. So I guess by that point, the show already won me over.
Yeah, I think that's.
I don't remember why though, but yeah, it was what a great ending to an episode.
If you were doing a little digest thing and you had to press the over key here and pop up the little score thing, what would you give it?
Based on my memory, probably a 4, like a lower end of the 4s. I don't know, like a 4 out of 5. I remember really liking it. I think the weakest bit is that first episode, and definitely the last episode. I don't remember why, but I guess some of the stuff you were saying about like the Julia storyline being a twist or something, I remember not liking that, and it felt really weak, and they all split up, and I don't know. I also agree with the ending was a bit weak, but the middle part I really enjoyed.
There's also like Jet's daughter gets kidnapped to do the thingy, and it's like, oh, okay, so all the plots converge,
yeah, sure.
Convoluge, whatever you.
Converge, yes.
Shut up, EliteAri. The I guess do you have any other scenes that stand out particularly in your memory? Because that would be interesting.
I mean, there's like I was dying laughing at the scene where like was it Jet was trying to look at his daughter's recital or something, and Spike was like fighting in the background or something like that.
That was a good one.
I was dying. It was hilarious. My God.
And the cashier dude waves back at him at the end because he thinks he's like watching him.
Oh yes! Oh my God, it's so great.
I didn't like that part.
That's comedy right there. You know, One Piece live action never had anything that funny. Right? This was a funny adaptation for sure. What else did I like? I think I remember there was a cool backstory episode with Spike and Vicious. I remember liking that a lot.
That was
I think you even said it's like the second last episode or something. Yeah. And I did like I don't remember what the context was, but it was a cool action piece where he's like going through a building and like killing a bunch of people.
That was really cool, actually. I didn't bring that up, but yes, he like just kills everybody in there. That was really cool, and it was like, oh, Spike can do that. I will say at the beginning of the show, it was like, how much can Spike do? Can he just like beat up all these guys, or what's going on here? Because obviously in the show at the end, he runs up that building and just kills everybody. But he does get killed in the process. My goodness. Well, probably.
We'll never know.
Yeah, because it is really violent, and he's got the thing, I don't kill kids, but then he does kill that little girl at the end. All to save his friend Vicious. Can you believe it, EliteAri? And then that Vicious turns on him. How vicious.
So true.
So you hate
let me think, is there anything else that stands out?
You know, he was a weirdo. We didn't like him.
He's in something else, I think. And I think
everybody
I
in this
realized
fucking
this when I
show
watched
is
the
in
Blind
something
Wave
else, and I
reactions
couldn't
or
find a
something.
single one of them, EliteAri. Not one of them could. Oh, Julia was in Revenge. She was like the ditzy redhead girl with the giant boobs. Boobs didn't look too giant in this one, EliteAri. They were pretty big though, but that was weird. I don't know what happened there. But other than that, I was like, this Anna woman is in something else. Vicious, I definitely recognize from something else. Gren, I definitely knew from something else, but I looked it up. I looked at their filmography, couldn't recognize a goddamn thing, EliteAri. So that was pissing me off.
Okay, now I gotta look this up. Who is this guy? Alex something.
The Vicious guy, yes.
Oh my God, it's not blonde. It was a wig.
Yes, he's got a black hair, I believe. Just quickly, Miller the Scylla, very funny comment here says, "I want to live," famous Cowboy Bebop scene. EliteAri, that's funny because it's a One Piece scene.
Is it?
Yeah,
I don't remember.
It's a very famous One Piece scene. It's not in the live action. It'll be in season like 4, EliteAri. But don't worry, you'll be caught up on the anime by then. Or you'll drop that shit after 3 miserable episodes. You know, that shit's boring.
Yep. Okay, I realized Vicious is from The Boys. I think it's like the invisible guy or whatever.
Boring.
Anyway.
We hate The Boys here.
I actually made a few notes when you were talking. Let's see if any of these are worthwhile. Oh no, wait, this is something you didn't talk about. What did you think of the opening? Like the opening music that they like integrate into every episode?
Like,
or it's like they have like a transition and then the music starts.
Remember when I said the transition was really cool, EliteAri? How dare you say something I didn't bring up when I brought it up? All
right, I didn't remember, but yeah, I like that too. And I don't. This is a very specific thing I remember. I remember liking it the most, where there's like a bathroom fight in a church or something, and then the transition happens there. Was that like a?
That's
that
episode
one
2, I think, where they send the assassin after the Great Spike or Fearless maybe. And yes, they're at like a wedding, and they're both there, but then Spike has to go pee, and then the dude attacks him in there.
Excellent.
Which is taking from the episode 3 plot with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or whatever his name is, where he does fight Spike in episode 2 of the original show in a bathroom, but they gave that to this character because they were mixing things up a little bit. You know, it was a little crazy on God.
Excellent. I love changes. Okay. 2 more notes. One is that I completely agree. Well, I don't know if you necessarily said this, but I think a second season would have been much more interesting. Because I would be so curious where everything would go. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like this show, I would have loved this show a lot more, I think, even if they kept the same world, but just like made an original story. Like I like the world of this. I guess you also said that actually a little bit. I do like this world, and the characters are like pretty okay too. But I feel like if they just change the story a lot, and they could do that in like a second season, but I guess we're not getting one, so we'll never know. Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like they were definitely setting up some original show storylines. I feel like it probably would have been equally as different as the first season, but who knows? In that Critical Drinker video, EliteAri, that I did watch, I feel like you watched it on stream because I definitely felt like I'd watched that video before. He brought up, like, he was making fun of, like, the lead screenwriter girl she had rainbow hair and she looked like a non-binary EliteAri, so that was very funny. Where she was, like, on Twitter saying, man, you guys are really missing out. I read the season 2 scripts and they were just so good. And they were like, you
awesome.
stupid bitch, it sucks. So I guess they did exist. They had ideas, EliteAri. Also, another interesting thing is the whole adaptation conversation, EliteAri. I'm trying to think, has EliteAri ever had something that's been adapted? And obviously, well, no, you watched Chainsaw Man first.
I'm sure there has been.
I guess Attack on Titan, you generally like those. Those are so similar, though. Have you ever watched the original? Well, I guess this is kind of the idea, but you didn't really care for the original. It kind of has to be something you really like, EliteAri. And then it gets Netflixed, and I wonder what your reaction to something like that would be, if it's happened.
I'm sure there's something like that out there. I don't know what, though.
Like, Look Back happened recently, but, you know, you like that shit because you're
Yeah,
an
it's like,
embarrassment.
yeah, exactly. I don't know, nothing's coming to mind, but I'm sure there has to be something. Yeah, I guess talking about the adaptation stuff, I do think that, like, One Piece's success does have to do greatly with the meta-narrative before the show came out about how, like, you've got the author who is, like, behind it, and all the cast are, like, giving respect to the original people, and oh my god, the whole everyone really cares about. That's obviously
the
why
Luffy guy
at least the
very
internet's
positive.
reaction was positive. Yeah,
and the Faygo
but also
was very mean to us.
Yeah, that's I don't remember that beforehand, but yeah, maybe. I know there's, like, the video I watched, but anyway, I think the more interesting not interesting, another real reason that One Piece could probably be a lot more successful, people like it more, is that I think the story of One Piece is at least what I've seen so far, is much more mass appealing. It has a very joyful vibe. It's very pleasant to watch. This show is not pleasant to watch, at least not all the time. Like, sometimes it is, but it has, like, kind of slower moments and kind of, like, a darker-ish kind of tone, or, like, a more seedy tone in a way. It's definitely not as friendly. So I can see a difference there.
There is,
But, oh my god, Heath is a genius, by the way. This is absolutely right. Anyway, keep going, sorry. And then we'll talk about Mushoku Tensei.
Ari's already complained about Mushoku. That's true. He's a little crybaby about this. Thinks the anime fell off in terms of animation. You know, he's crazy for that. I shouldn't have done that tangent. I forgot what I was going to say earlier.
Oh, boy. Okay.
What was it about? Adaptations or something? What did you just say?
Yeah, One Piece, mass appealing.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of in the middle in terms of identity. I'm an idiot, EliteAri. I just repeat things that I'm thinking about other things and try to force them onto this. Jack and Daxter EliteAri is a video game. And I've been watching a bunch of videos on it because I'm playing through it right now, and it's part of my little Crash video idea I have going. And a big, an interesting thing that a bunch of YouTubers have sort of brought up is that Jack and Daxter sort of lacks an identity, sort of the identity that Crash had before him and then sort of Uncharted would have after him. Maybe that's the case here too, where it's sort of like, if you want sort of a dark, gritty show, like something like The Last of Us adaptation is probably much better and much more mass appealing. And if you want something more joyful and wacky and anime, the One Piece adaptation is much better. Now, obviously, these shows didn't come out near each other, but it's just sort of like in a zeitgeist thing. Like, everybody loves The Last of Us show, and everybody loves the One Piece show, even though I have problems with The Last of Us show. Because I feel like it reminds me horribly of another, like, space show where you're, like, journeying around having wacky adventures. But I know I haven't seen a show like that. But it's just, like, you can... Like, I feel like if you were watching this with your girlfriend, like, she'd be like, oh, yeah, whatever. It's, like, something. But it's not, like... It doesn't have anything where it's going to be, like, cool and dark and, like, you're going to cry. Besides your Faye turn around scene, of course.
Yeah.
And it's not, like, so funny that it's just, like, enjoyable. Like, this show would be good to have on in the background, I guess. But, like, One Piece is probably better for that. And if you want to pay attention to something, The Last of Us is probably better. I don't know. It's kind of in the middle of what... I guess it's probably pretty bingeable, which would probably work. Right. But so are all those shows. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, like, goofy, but also, like... It's also the violence and the sex aspect is kind of like, well, you can't really watch this with your family, I guess. Whereas you could probably watch the original Cowboy Bebop with your like 11-year-old son and be like, when he cuts that guy's head off, you know, he's just, you know, it's just a thing, you know. He doesn't even cut his head off; he cuts his eyes off. You know, his tears of.
I do wonder how popular is the original Cowboy Bebop. Because I don't feel like I don't feel that's a mass appealing thing. Like, how would you
Um,
compare it to something like Attack on Titan? Even that, I feel like that's not very mass. No,
it's
that has
definitely
action, so people love action.
it's definitely
Um,
more of a legacy show. I think the whole thing is that Cowboy Bebop was one of the like big Adult Swim shows, so and that's where a lot of its
oh, okay,
West popularity comes from. Um,
yeah.
yeah, it is. It is always an interesting like how much wide appeal does the original show have versus its like legacy. Like Evangelion is like the most popular thing of all time in Japan or whatever. It makes the most money every year, all the machines or whatever.
Yeah, due
But
to
like
gambling, yeah.
in the West, it's like not that popular. Right? Like it's not. It is no Attack on Titan or anything like that. Um, though Attack on Titan's probably a terrible example because it's just like the most popular thing.
Demon Slayer.
Yeah. Well, no, that would be an even worse example. But the what are we saying? It is a weird thing because I have told you the story about how I went to that girl's place and she had just seen Cowboy Bebop, the original show, and I think she even did shit talk the live action or something, and she was just like a Chinese immigrant girl. So my anecdotal experience is like maybe Cowboy Bebop does have a lot of like mass appeal in that sense. I don't know. Cowboy, it's kind of also an older thing of the episodic nature sort of makes it mass appealing because it's sort of like made for TV and like, oh, you can watch any episode if it's just on at any time. And obviously, if it's on like whatever you call it, not Toonami, what was I saying, Adult Swim or whatever, it's like, oh, yeah, the first episode you saw was episode 12 and you know, you were just sitting there and you were like with your big brother and you're like, man, this show's pretty cool. They're shooting and stuff. I know in the old Digibro video about it, that's sort of the narrative of like, I was just watching the show one time and I was like, I've never seen something that made me feel like a grown up or whatever. And it was like Cowboy Bebop. But I don't know. Who knows? Do you want to talk about Mushoku Tensei? I just got the first battery warning.
No, just to say that like that is an adaptation where I love the original. And I think for the most part, like I really did like that second season, which I watched like after I watched the adaptation. So I think it's like an example of something that was done very well. But I mean, it's pretty similar as well at the same time. And my complaints for that are like very minor, like where they would cut out certain bits. I mean, obviously the production is like a issue I have with it, but it's still good.
Yeah, the anime adaptation pipeline is like very different.
They're very close, yeah.
Yeah, like just generally, like there are animes that are way different and get like Promised Neverland or whatever, but generally, like obviously the live actionizing of a show makes it very different. Like even something that people say is pretty similar, like the Game of Thrones adaptation, or like I think the Game of Thrones adaptation changes the characters nearly as much as like Cowboy Bebop does. But people just sort of don't care because the plot is basically the same, I guess. What was the second example I just brought up? Oh, I didn't even bring it up. But Harry Potter is also like that, where you're like, oh, like these final books are like very, very different to like the movie or whatever. At least from what I understand, I haven't actually read them, EliteAri, but the sort of things that are said. But again, it's sort of like people don't care. I guess because the Game of Thrones TV show is like good, and those movies are fun and good. But I don't know. Cowboy Bebop, what a show. None of these Netflix shows have any identity. Both of them sanitize the original and have more mass appeal than becomes generic slop. I don't know, that One Piece thing when I was in New Zealand, all those boys were that I'm dying, EliteAri. That had never read One Piece, they were all talking about how great this show was whenever they watched it. So I feel like this One Piece show certainly has crossed over in a bunch of regards.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, even just separate of that, One Piece has the cool action. Like anyone, even I don't know how Miller denies it, but it's like the one good thing about that show, like universally.
Well, we'll see. You know, that's going to be coming up soon, I think. The books are not that different from the movies. Lamau. I assume he's probably talking about Harry Potter there, EliteAri. But I'm pretty sure all these things I've heard where it's like, oh, this plot thing is different and something. I feel like those are pretty big changes.
Yeah. I have read the books, and I read them before I watched the movie, or most of them. Like, I think I read it, like, when... I think Jesus. The Order of the Phoenix might be the first one where I'd, like, read all of them.
That is one that they say is, like, really different, right?
I don't remember. Like, to me, they feel pretty similar. But also, the biggest change, I feel like, was in the first half of the Deathly Hallows, like, the part 1.
Yeah,
I don't know why I remember just thinking, this is, like, quite different. Yeah,
but
I think all the others
say Half-Blood Prince is almost like very much the same. Though there's like parts at the end that are very different or whatever.
Well, there's like like Dumbledore apparating out of the Hogwarts or whatever. It's like you shouldn't be able to do that. Stuff like that, like small. I remember stuff like that bothering me, but not like big thing.
I don't know, the Order of the Phoenix stuff that I remember from the a million videos I've... Oh,